they're sold for like
thousands.
5,000 a pup.
Yeah, so if you remember, the Westminster Dog Show is what they're about to attack, so to speak, because at the Westminster Dog Show, that's where it's a dog show for best in breed, and whoever wins best in breed then ultimately can be bred to make puppies of that breed, whether it's a Great Dane, or if it's a Golden Doodle, or if it's a Dachshund, whatever it might be. That's what the Westminster Dog Show is all about. Close your computers, please. We're going to be on chapter 28. And if you remember in chapter 27, at the very end, we had a picture of Jeeves with his big jowls flying through the air. They tethered him to a rope, and the wind caught his jowls, and he's like flying through the wind at the very top of this of Madison Square Garden. And the security guard sees him, and Jeeves says, quack. Like he's a duck, but he's not really a duck. They're scoping out the joint, so to speak. So that's what we left off on page 161. We're going to start on page 163. It's chapter 28, and it says borrowing. So Sam goes back, and he gets the whole motley crew of dogs, all these misfit, unwanted dogs that have all these different characteristics about them. Does anybody have a favorite? Who's your favorite dog and all that?
Nutbush.
Mrs. Nutbush, she's a character. I'm looking for these flawed dogs, though. Yeah.
Why the blue one and purple?
The blue and purple one, he's kind of cool looking. I personally like Poofed. I believe it's Poofed. Is that his name? The guy that's got the rocket fire gas, or he toots and it shoots him out like a rocket. Because I think explosive gas is funny.
And I like the cat.
I like a little
The
dog.
cat that's pretending to be a dog.
I like the little dog that's up there.
You like that little one because that little one's going to show up in this next sequence here. If you take a look. Actually, that picture is from a different... There it is. On page 185, there's a picture of the little one. All right, so chapter 28, that's where we left off. We'll see if we can get that in today. Borrowing is the name of the chapter. Noon, one day before the big show. Mrs. Corinthian Nutbush, last seen 3 years before, strapped to a Vermont ambulance gurney without most of her clothes, walked. Do you guys remember that part? She was wearing that big purple, like, mole fur coat, and they said gopher, and all the dogs chased her and tore her clothes off, and she was hiding in, like, going crazy. I think she dove into the pond or something, and they had to carry her out. Mrs. Nutbush, last seen 3 years before, strapped to a Vermont ambulance gurney without most of her clothes, walked out the front doors, having freshly registered her new long-haired dachshund, Mr. Toodles, for the Westminster competition. As usual, Mrs. Nutbush was wrapped from head to foot in the fur of many of the world's rarest animals. On this day, it was leopard, chinchilla, baby seal, and the rare Peruvian long-haired blue vole. The latter species having only a dozen known individuals left on the planet before Mrs. Nutbush's hat was made from 10 of them. Her Mr. Toodles led the way on a jeweled leash. After tucking her priceless Westminster credentials inside her purse, Mrs. Nutbush moved into Central Park and paused to sit on a bench in front of the East Fountain. As the stress of preparing for the world's most important dog show was wearing on a giant gopher-like woman her age, she dozed off while Mr. Toodles licked up the pigeon droppings, whose taste he found similar to Junior Mints. Ew. Mr. Toodles looked up from his brunch to see what he first thought was a spotted mouse with at the end of a long string in its mouth emerge from the hedge, run up Mrs. Nutbush's seal boot, and disappear below her coat. Mr. Toodles sat down and continued tracking the creature by the small movements he could see it make as it traversed the towering peaks and valleys amidst the generous acreage below Mrs. Nutbush's clothes. The dachshund watched, fascinated, as the rodent scampered through the coat, the handbag, both her gloves, the loop on the back of her boots, and then finally up her scarf around the mighty Miss Nutbush neck. All right, so the little dog with string is wrapping all the string around all of her clothes, like underneath her coat. It wasn't until Mr. Toodles saw the little creature actually drop the string temporarily, creep up the snoring woman's face, and poke its head deep into the vastness of her right nostril that he finally realized the creature wasn't a mouse at all, but a 3-ounce dog. Here's a picture of that. So a little tiny dog going up her nose. It wasn't until Mr. Toodles saw the little creature actually drop the string temporarily, creep up the snoring woman's face, and poke its head deep into the vastness of her right nostril that he finally realized that the creature wasn't a mouse at all, but a 3-ounce dog. He knew this because when the tiny mutt pulled his head out from the nutbush honker, he turned around, looked down as if staring at the dachshund, and said, "If you yodel, there's an echo." Yodeling. This is also when Mrs. Nutbush awoke to find what she believed to be a baby rat on her upper lip. She screamed and leaped to her feet as though struck by an electric cattle prod, while Wee Willie grabbed the string again and made a swan dive into the bottomless mine shaft of her cleavage. This sent the president of the Vermont Dachshund Club into a windmilling frenzy of self-body slapping and high kicks as Wee Willie's movements began. Below, the clothing grew even more athletic. Mrs. Nutbush began to tear her clothes completely off. That was the plan. Mr. Toodles sat motionless on the sidewalk, chewing his snacks and watching with keen interest as his female human, now stripped down once again to her natural birthday suit, yikes, ran off shrieking for a pest exterminator. As she did so, the quite naked Mrs. Nutbush flapped her limbs and jogged toward the lake, looking, though, thought Mr. Toodles, like a thawed Christmas turkey trying to fly. The little dachshund turned back and saw the tiny spotted mutt had run into the hedge, with the end of the string now looped through every item that was formerly on Mrs. Nutbush. The indigo, blue, and purple head of the much larger pit bull cran mixed dog emerged from the plants to take the string in its green teeth and pull the tangle of clothes and accessories into the bushes. Mr. Toodles then watched as the 3-legged dachshund and another smaller curly-haired black mutt approached him through the plants. Sam pointed to the collar and leash around Mr. Toodles' neck. "I'll take that, pal." Mr. Toodles was too stunned to move. Sam sighed and nudged, poofed. He spat a flame from his afterburner, charring a tulip 6 feet behind him. Mr. Toodles quickly slipped out of the jeweled collar. Don't kill me," he said, shaking. Sam and Poof grabbed the leash into their mouths, turned and ran off down the path along the lake, headed uptown. They were joined by the other depository escapees, Mrs. Nutbush's belongings tumbling behind them on the string like the day's catch of fresh trout. Then the freshly robed, long-haired little dachshund called out, the 3 most welcome words ever heard during the scrambling raiders' lost, forgotten lives.
Are you pirates?
Are you pirates? Chapter 29, if you take a look and flip the page, what do you think they're going to do with all of Mrs. Nutbush's clothes?
Act like her.
They're going to act like her. So if you turn the page, Presley, you'll see it on page 168. You have a good picture of those dogs all strapped into Mrs. Nutbush's outfit, walking in Max to the Westminster Dog Show.
That's funny.
All right, so we'll stop there for today.